Hi, I'm Alvin Pasaoa,
Hello, my name is Kevin Jefferies.
and this is the 635 podcast. The 635 podcast is about local politics, economics, and social and cultural issues in the Alvin Community College area. The views expressed on the show are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of Alvin Community College. And we are on today. I am here with Kevin Jefferies.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about the primary elections in our area, Brazoria County. And Kevin, what's going on?
Well, Albert, what's happening is that both political parties in the state of Texas, the major political parties, are having their primaries. All parties across the nation are doing that sort of thing. They have their own ways of doing it. Most of them give opportunities for the people who identify with their respective parties to show up, vote for a series of candidates, and figure out who is going to be the party's nominee for different offices that are going to be up for grabs this November.
All right. So are we going to cover the Democratic and Republican primaries?
Briefly, yes. They're held on the same day. Sometimes they're held in the same room. You go into one line to vote in the Democratic primary and another line to vote in the Republican primary. You can only vote in one.
Okay. And so we're going to have candidates up as well as various issues.
Not so much issues, except as we will see in the Republican sample ballot, there is the opportunity for people who vote there to say yes or no to a variety of proposals from the party given to the voters, but nothing is what's the word I'm looking for? It's a non-binding referendum, meaning it's not doing it. It just gives a sense about where people that identify with the Republican Party are on different sorts of issues. And we can walk through some of these things.
Some of those, I remember just from the past, some of them seem like so unserious. It would be like, do you like puppies? Is ice cream good?
Do you want to look at them? Do you want to look at them? We're looking right now at the... we can jump straight to that, to tell you the truth.
Well, let's start with a big overview. So we have primaries coming up. When are the primaries?
It's going to be, let's see, we are 2/21/2024. It's going to be 3/05/2024. So what are we looking at? 2 weeks?
Right around the corner. 2 weeks.
Right around the corner. We are actually, to tell you the truth, you could vote right now. We are going through our early voting period.
Okay, so early voting is available. Is our break? Okay, obviously. This is not mail-in. This is like you could walk into places.
You walk into places. There are options for mail-in for all elections. You kind of have to have that set up, already. But all of these you can also have mail-in.
Now, give me an overview. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but give me what are the hottest? Give me a quick overview of some hot items that are on this, if any.
Well, it's less items than it is people.
Okay, candidates.
Again, candidates, yes. We don't get into the specific items until later on.
Okay.
So this is simply, again, these are run by the parties. The Democratic Party of Brazoria County is in charge of the Brazoria County Democratic primary. The Republican Party of Brazoria County is responsible for the Republican primary in Brazoria County. And again, we got 254 counties in the state of Texas, and they're all doing the same thing.
Okay. And so just give me a quick overview. What are the hottest election issues?
Well, we could do that. Going through the ballots, let me do something real quick. For anybody who's watching, because you're probably curious about dates, you're asking me, about these things coming up. One of the links that I have available for my students, it takes you to the Texas Secretary of State's website. And the Texas Secretary of State's site, all states have one, and they're basically not so much the bookkeepers, that would be the comptroller. These would be the people who deal with records and whatnot.
And you can find this list on The Weaker Party, which is your blog.
Or you can just go, Google Texas Secretary of State election office, and they're the ones that oversee elections in the state of Texas.
Let's have people come to your blog. It's theweakerparty.blogspot.com, theweakerparty.blogspot.com. And let me just give everyone a glance of this overall site, which I know you use to teach your government classes.
Yes, I do.
And you're constantly updating this blog with important information, some of it local here, but others I'm looking at sort of more maybe philosophical. Was the founding undemocratic? something about jury duty, etc. So it looks like a good site.
Curb your enthusiasm thing we went through. Anyway, but part of the idea here is that you can find out where to find things out.
Okay.
And if you want to find things out related to election dates, the executive institution in the state of Texas that's in charge of that is the Secretary of State's website. That is the Chief Elections Officer for the state of Texas.
And so here we have, all right, so we're going to go through this. So we're going to look at the Texas Secretary of State offices up
I got a
for
link
election.
to important 2024 election dates. And you can see when all of the elections are going to be.
There it is.
There you go.
Offices up for re-election. Oh, wow. Let's see. So these are, okay, obviously President of the United States. I'm starting at the top. Obviously. Okay.
Well, here, let's walk through this, okay? Because what we're going to be selecting now is all of the party nominees for the different offices that are partisan. Now, what does that mean? That means that you run as a Republican or you run as a Democrat. Now, in about a month, and I'm sure we're going to meet again to talk about this that time, Alvin Community College is going to have an election for 3 members of the Board of Trustees. That is a nonpartisan position. You don't vote for a Republican or a Democrat there. When it comes to, I think the city of Alvin's going to have some elections as well. That is a nonpartisan election. Counties are, however, because the county is the administrative wing of the state, and we're going to see some county positions coming up right here.
I see.
But for president, it's a 4-year term, obviously. We didn't vote for it in 2022, but now we have the opportunity, if you vote with the Republicans, to figure out, who you want of the 9 different names you're going to see to get the delegates. And this is an interesting thing that people kind of forget about. You never actually vote for the person, vote for the president. What you vote for are delegates that are pledged to vote for the president in the upcoming conventions, the state convention, the national convention, and same sort of thing with the Democrats as well too. You'll see Biden there, but you'll see a bunch of other names. You'll see Trump with the Republicans, but you'll see other names as well too.
But even though people, it's going to be delegates that these candidates are going to get, the actual on the ballot will be the names
of the
candidate.
person. Yes.
Okay. Really quickly, do we have the full slate on the Republican side?
When we look at the sample ballots for each of the different precincts, we'll see that. You want to run through very quickly the positions that are up, because this is a great way.
Sure.
I like to do it in class, kind of say, okay, these are the different sorts of national positions, and there's not that much. Most of these are state. Our senator, we have 2 senators. One of them has their term is coming to an end, and they are going to try to attempt to get another 6-year term. That obviously is Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, is there anybody running against him?
We will see that. Yes, there are. There's 2 other Republicans that are running against him, and there are 8 or 9 Democrats that are competing to become the Democratic nominee that will face off with the winner. I'm assuming it's going to be Cruz, but you never know. I'm not going to, I'm not making predictions in November.
But I don't think there's any serious challengers to Ted, is there?
Among Republicans, no. And actually, this is an interesting thing, too, because if you want to have a future in the Republican Party, you don't take on an incumbent. Same sort of thing with Democrats. You don't take on an incumbent from within the party, because that could potentially weaken them. Let's say Cruz does have a reasonable challenger. And I don't think so, but obviously when the votes come out, we'll get an idea if there is any weakness within the Republican Party. I don't think so. But let's say that there is, and somebody takes advantage of him and weakens him in the general election. And again, that person's future within the Republican Party is probably non-existent.
Yeah, who would run against an incumbent, especially since I'm just kind of assuming that Ted Cruz is going to win. So who would run?
There are different reasons for doing it. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't have this lined up to discuss, but this could be something we get into later on. Our governor is a little bit upset with some of the Republicans that voted against his proposals for school vouchers. In the last legislative session. And so he, along with, I think, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, are supporting people to run against. They have been doing this, and they continue to run against, and they're also supporting individuals to try to take out in the primary those Republicans that voted against him in the last
And these would be people in the state legislature?
Yes, the state legislature.
Okay.
So that's an example. I mean, there are all sorts of different sorts of reasons. If Republicans, there's a lot of this. So sometimes you hear people, Republicans talk about these things called rhinos. Republican in name only. Sometimes you'll hear something similar with Democrats, but less so, meaning somebody who's not sufficiently conservative. And so somebody might want to take them on in a primary to replace somebody who's, let's say, a moderate Republican with a more ideologically pure Republican, let's say.
And what about on the Democratic side? I mean, that's got to be bigger, right? I mean, in terms of there's definitely something at stake. These past.
We'll notice that. We'll notice that when we open up the sample ballots. If you want to, let's just very quickly kind of scroll through the general names that you're going to see here. So we got the president, you got your senator, all 38 United States representatives from Texas. Texas is big enough to where we have 38. We've been delegated 38 individuals to represent the state in the United States House of Representatives, and the state legislature carved these up into 38 equally sized districts, equal as far as the numbers from the 2020 census. That was 4 years ago, so everybody's kind of moved around a little bit. Yeah. You got the railroad commissioner. Those are 3 individuals elected for overlapping 6-year terms. Their basic thing is to regulate the production of oil and gas in the state of Texas. Then you notice, and this is another place that's kind of contentious as well. We can talk about this perhaps a little bit later on. We have 2 top courts in the state of Texas, 9 people in the Texas Supreme Court, 9 people in the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Texas Supreme Court is the final court of jurisdiction for for civil issues in the state of Texas. Not completely final, because you can appeal things to the United States Supreme Court from all of these institutions. But you got 3 people that are running.
How big is the Supreme Court?
9 people. And they all serve for 6-year terms. They're elected, but overlapping teams of 3. Okay. Very similar to the United States Senate. And again, the Court of Criminal Appeals. Then you've got the State Board of Education. Total of 15 members, 7 are running right now for a 4-year term. In 2 years, the other 8 will run for 4-year terms.
Oh, wow.
State senators, you have 15. There's a total of 31 in the state of Texas. 15 are running right now for a 4-year term. The other 16 will run in 2 years. So there's your 16. I'm sorry, your 31. 150 state representatives. Texas is carved into 150 different.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were that many.
There are that many.
I don't know if you're familiar with California, but I wonder how many state representatives there are in California.
We are probably about 15 seconds from finding out.
I didn't know that the state reps there'd be so many of them.
You'd be surprised how many people don't know that.
That's
all right. Courts of appeals. Now, the top courts just beneath that are appellate courts, just like the national level. But again, the big difference here is that we elect these individuals, and that's something we could get into later on, the pros and cons of electing judges. And let's say the different appellate judges, 6-year terms, and again, all of this overlaps. Then you got district judges. What we start getting into beneath the Court of Appeals are county positions. The district judges, those are the trial court judges. An appellate court is about whether or not process was followed. The district court is about facts. Is the you call the jury listens to evidence. Did the jury make the right decision? Was the process by which the defendant brought to court their ability to face their accusers and have competent counsel? All of that, was that all adhered to? Those are the kinds of questions that could be appellate issues. The district court is basically about whether or not this group of individuals, the jury thinks this person is actually guilty or not. You're not found innocent, you're presumed innocent. You have to be found guilty, and if you're not found guilty, you're acquitted. So the district judges, and this is an interesting thing with Texas, you elect these are countywide positions, and it is the district court for the state. So any accusation that somebody has violated state law happens in the county brought by a district attorney elected countywide in front of a district judge elected countywide. And the idea, too, is that means that the individuals that are up there are going to be making decisions in sync with what the county wants. Like if you're in Austin, Travis County, Harris County as well, too. their attitude about low-level nonviolent drug crimes is much more lenient than it might be here in Brazoria County.
But these these judges are going to be presiding over cases that involve law.
Yeah.
At which level? Like you got
State level.
State level.
State stuff. Yeah. If you go out there, I always counsel my students like this too. If you're going to go out there and do some crimes, be aware of what crimes you're violating. If it's a federal crime, well, that's going to go into the federal courts, and that's not this. This is all state stuff. What we're looking at right here.
Okay.
Federal courts are a whole different ball game. So yeah, this would deal with state issues. By the way, state issues, not city issues. Notice there are no city elections here. City elections are not partisan, and that's what's going to be happening on was it May 5th? I think it is, or May 4th. If the types of things that you could crimes you could commit, I don't think you would call them crimes necessarily. Violations of city ordinances. Running a red light, your dog's loose, whatever. That would be the kind of thing that would go to a city municipal court. But scroll it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So state law then is presided over these judges who are elected, but federal laws, those judges are just appointed by the president?
Appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, and then they serve for life. Now, the idea was that's how you get independence on the part of the judiciary. Now, some folks, Texas, they don't want the judges, let's say, to be too independent of the opinion of the particular district they're elected from. So here, like I said, the voters of Brazoria County, the voters of Fort Bend or Galveston or Chambers or Harris or Montgomery or whatever, they might have slightly different attitudes about how they would like low-level nonviolent drug crimes punished or punished at all. So this means that if a district attorney is a little bit too light on prosecuting individuals for these crimes in Brazoria County, they could get the boot. Then this is what the primary election first and then the general election are about. And again, the attitude might be a little bit different in Harris County. They might say, okay, well, you're a little bit light on this person, but that's okay. We don't think this is where our resources should go. You should be focusing on other types of criminal activity or whatever. That gives voters in Harris County the opportunity to make that decision.
Okay.
So the rest right here, if you want to walk through it, family district judges. There are some courts that specifically focus on family law, family issues. District attorneys, now that would be part of the executive branch that takes the cases forward, decides whether or not to ask for an indictment to prosecute somebody. You get your evidence from the sheriffs. Those are elected countywide. County courts at law, there's certain sorts of specific disputes, and we would have to get into the misdemeanor, low-level felony, how much money is involved. That's the kind of thing that a county court of law would deal with. County attorney, we get to vote for the person who represents the county in a court of law. If a Brazoria County is sued or it wants to sue somebody, the county attorney's office would be responsible for that. Tax assessors and collectors, these are the people we love because, we have an appraisal district that figures out what your home is worth, and then the tax assessor takes that and applies this to all of the different tax rates that are voted on in the different boards of trustees for the independent school district, community college district, the cities, the counties, all the rest of that, and they figure out what you in fact actually owe in property taxes. County commissioners, also including a county judge, they oversee the management of counties. Justice of the peace, low-level disputes, constables. Now, constables and sheriffs and all that, we got all sorts of different types of law enforcement, and I always struggled trying to figure out exactly what the difference between constables and sheriffs was. And it occurred to me because I'll work different elections, and generally it's the constable that comes by and helps secure the passage of the ballots from the election, the polling place to the place where you drop it off. And I also notice whenever I do jury duty, it's the constable that kind of walks you around. And so one of the things I guess a constable does, it's sort of like the security guards for the county. They're not there necessarily to investigate, prosecute, whatever, hunt down the bad guys. They're to protect individuals from malfeasance, I suppose. But it's a little bit up in the air. Okay. Now that is a total of all the different offices that's up for grabs right now. Did you want to look at some of these folks?
Sure. Anyone you think is interesting.
Well, let me. I don't know if you're back on the blog, but again, I got links, and this, just directly links. I don't have anything really fancy going on here. Every county has an elections division. Brazoria County is no exception, and that means counties are where you actually run things in general. The state, I think I may have mentioned this other times when we visited. The state really does not run things other than it builds highways, it runs penitentiaries. Other than that, it's relatively, low level. I mean, you got Department of Public Safety, the DPS troopers or whatnot. But, they have jurisdiction over the highways when you're not in a city, a municipal area. Most of the enforcement of state law happens, if not by the county, people like us, a community college or an independent school district. They're the ones that actually do it. And that also includes elections. So the state passes the laws associated with elections, and it gives it to the county to, in fact, actually enforce it. They're doing it right now. I mean, they're looking for people to work the elections. They're making sure the machinery is all set up. One of the things they have to make sure is that the ballots are all done so that, you get to choose the right positions. All right? You mentioned 150. We talked about that, 150 different Texas House districts. Well, you live in one of them, and so when you go to vote, you have to have the right person, the right choice. So it's a pretty complicated task, a very important one too.
All right.
So but let's do this. There's other sorts of things we can get at. Where you register, how do you find out what particular precinct you're on? But if you'd like to, towards the bottom you see Democratic sample ballots and Republican sample ballots.
Oh, okay.
So we can, if you want to click on Democratic sample ballots, what you'll see.
Okay.
Find your
precinct.
Find your precinct. You know what we could do? I think that we here are in I don't know, what is it, 52nd precinct, something like that. But I'll tell you what, just to make it easy, put precinct 1. And I'm not sure exactly where that is.
You just click on 01D?
Click on that. And you got a sample ballot.
Okay, there we go.
Now, this isn't really what your ballot's going to look like. Elsewhere, what you're going to see is a little bit of a description of the computerized system. You'll see a copy of this posted someplace, so you can kind of check it all out if you haven't already seen this. Mm-hmm. But things are going to be presented to you one at a time in a Verity Duo machine. Now, the Verity is the company that makes these things. Duo is because of issues that go back to, 2016, 2018. People were uncomfortable with voting electronically and not having some kind of paper trail. This creates the paper trail.
I think I've seen that.
That's what Duo means. Mm. So you're voting on a screen, an actual touch screen. And before you do that, you put in this piece of paper, and then after you vote, excuse me, my apologies. Then it's gonna, the paper's gonna come out, and you can kind of look at the votes on the paper, and so the paper is also going to be inputted elsewhere. It's going to be read in a second place, and then the paper is going to be dumped into this box, the ballot box. So you've got the electronic record, the paper record, and the actual paper itself. Mm-hmm. So there are all sorts of different ways that somebody can go by and make sure that everything's correct. Okay. Now, notice this. It says sample ballot, precinct 1. And remember, I mentioned, I think a little while ago, Texas has what's called open elections. Now, what does that mean? I'm sorry, open primaries. When you register, you don't register in Texas as a member of a political party. Some places, maybe California is like this. You register as a Democrat, you register as a Republican or an unaffiliated or all sorts of different things. Meaning, if you register as a Democrat, you can only vote in the Democratic primary. And you figure that ahead of time. You don't do that in Texas. You can, like one of the last times I worked in a primary, it was in a high school gym. To one side was the Democratic primary, to the other side was the Republican primary. Now, you can only vote in one of them. If you vote in more than one, that means you voted twice. And you can only participate. Well, here, let me read through this, because the first thing you're going to see, and again, anybody who's voted has seen this, it says, by voting in the Democratic primary, you understand, and here's the quote, I am a Democrat and understand that I am ineligible to vote or participate in another political party's primary election or convention during this voting year. So let's say I decide to vote in the Democratic primary. I can't then go off and participate as an official in the Republican convention later this summer, or the Libertarian or the Green Party convention. And the same thing with Republicans, too. So you're committed for this electoral year, voting year, for participation in the Democratic Party. Now, I get a question I'll get sometimes that says, does that mean you have to vote for the Democrat in the general election? No one knows how you're voting. You can vote for whoever you want.
Yeah.
What if I am a Republican and I just want to screw things up for Democrats by voting in the Democratic primary? Can I do that? Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Now maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. What if I'm a Democrat and I want to vote in the Republican primary to try to screw things up for them? I can do it.
Wasn't that happening in, what was it, New Hampshire? Did they already have their primary?
Yes, and more interestingly, I think it was yesterday, Nikki Haley actually made a plea in South Carolina, which I'm supposing has open primaries as well. Since it's pretty much understood Biden's going to be the guy for Democrats. If you're a Democrat, switch over and vote for Haley in South Carolina. You can do that. Now, just because you do it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. There was the story is, and I don't know if this is really true or not, Republicans tried to do that in 2008 because they thought that Obama was a weaker candidate than Hillary Clinton. So they convinced individuals. Republicans switched over and they voted in a Democratic primary to vote for Obama. Obviously, he won, so that strategy wasn't really successful. But here, if you want to run through some of the names, you can see this is what you're going to see if you are your voting district where you live and where you can vote is Precinct 1 in Brazoria County. You got, 9 different names for president?
Let's see.
Star
let's come down here. Ooh, wow.
Gabrielle Cornejo, Frankie Lozada, Joseph Biden, Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, Shank Uyghur, Armando Perez Sarato. Now, again, you're not voting for that person. You're voting for delegates that will be pledged to those people. And it's an interesting process, kind of antiquated. We could, again, meet some other time to kind of talk about how that works. U.S. Senator. Now, this would be the person who's going to end up facing almost certainly Senator Cruz.
Who's the top dog here?
My understanding, Colin Allred, and he was a member of the United States House of Representatives from a district in the eastern part of Dallas. And there's a competition right now to replace him there because he has decided not to run again. And he seems to be the person right now. Now, let me throw this out real quick. Because with the exception of the president, where you're voting for delegates, and you're not really, all right, you can come in first, second, third, or whatever. What really is more important is the number of delegates that you get by coming in first or second. I think you might get some third. They keep changing rules. And after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm just tired of trying to keep up with all of this. Now, for senator, this is actually for the person to win. But the rules are, for primaries, for both Democrats and Republicans, is that you have to have a majority in order to win. Now, a majority is 50% plus one or more. Now, interestingly enough, for the general election, what you need is a plurality. That means more votes than anybody else.
Oh.
In 2006, Rick Perry won the general election for governor with 37% of the vote, and he won. But if you got 37% of the vote for the primary, you wouldn't win. You would have to go to a runoff.
Yeah.
Number 1 and number 2. This had to happen with the Houston mayoral election.
How did Rick Perry win? Was there a libertarian candidate?
There were 3 other people. No, not a libertarian. There was a Democrat, as would be expected. There was a kind of a renegade Republican, Carolyn Keaton Strayhorn, who was the comptroller at that time. Did not get along with Rick Perry. And there was Kinky Friedman, independent singer, songwriter, personality, whatnot. Anyway, chances are that it'll be Colin Allred and one of these other people running in the runoff, which is scheduled for May 28th. There are other places. We can maybe go to this a little bit later on, some other time. The dates for all of the elections are set in stone. Well, that's nothing.
The runoff. Is that it's just a runoff election, or is it tied to any other type of voting?
Runoff. For any of these things that don't have a majority winner.
What's the participation like in the runoffs?
Very low. And now it's going to be pretty low for the primaries too. Now there's a lot of interest in this particular one, but I would be surprised for Republicans if it was above 15%. Democrats if it was above 10%. Republicans tend to. This is an interesting thing because sometimes you will see polls in Texas saying that more people identify as Democrats than Republicans, but the people that identify as Democrats are part of demographic groups that vote at a lower level than people who identify with the Republican Party. So it kind of evens out. But we might be looking at 10% turnout with the Democrats for the primary, 15% for Republicans. And then it could be for a runoff, it could be 5% for the Republicans. And, there was one election, I think it was like 1.5% for Democrats. Okay. Now, if you want to real quick, you can see who the candidates are for the other positions. Now, if you're not able to recruit a candidate, you don't have anybody running. And there are a lot of positions here in Precinct 1, Brazoria County, because we're kind of a heavily, maybe 60 to 40% Republican to Democrat, maybe a little bit more gap between the two, but something like that. And there are a lot of places where Democrats just don't run. All right, so you do have somebody who's going to, with the one Democrat who wants to be the nominee to run for U.S. Representative District 14 will be running against Randy Weber, ACC grad Randy Weber, I always have to say.
How long has he been serving? I just see his name on
I think maybe 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more. Okay. It's been a while. Anyway, so you see Railroad Commissioner, you see some of these other positions, the Court of Appeals, the Court of Criminal Appeals, the Texas Supreme Court, State Senator, State Representative, some of the justices.
Okay, wait. Railroad Commissioner, is that non-partisan? No,
no, all of these are partisan.
All of these are partisan.
It's partisan. Why?
So it's on the primary ballot.
Because it's on the primary ballot. If it's on the ballot, a primary ballot, then
so
it's a partisan election.
Non-partisan is in
not
the
here,
general election. Okay.
This year I don't think you would have any. No. Now, in odd number years, remember in November, because I think we got together and we talked about the amendments, right? And remember Houston also was having its mayoral elections then, too. That's nonpartisan. Now, again, that helps explain why in that election you need a majority. But again, chances are, it's 15 or 16 people running for mayor in Houston. And the top two, I think they each had I think Whitmire had 36% and Jackson Lee had 32, something like that. And then they went on to the runoff. I haven't, to tell you the truth, and confession, I did not vote in the runoff. Sometimes I just...
wait. Another question. Is it a matter of public record if you voted in primaries?
Yes, it is.
Which party you voted? Okay.
Yes, we know which one. And that's valuable information, too, because if Republicans want to... energize individuals to go out, you want to know who to contact. So you don't really necessarily have to contact people who vote in the primary to run in the general election, but you might want to try to persuade them to get involved in persuading other people to vote. Now, one of the reasons why, because some people are like, well, I can't believe you're taking a record of this. We have to know if you voted if we want to prevent somebody from voting twice. Yeah. Now, one thing I want to point out before let's switch over and talk about the Republicans. The Republican primary in Precinct 1 in Brazoria County, Texas. The Democratic county chair. So since this is a party election, you get to vote for the chair of your particular county for your party. You also, if it's challenged, you can vote for the precinct chair as well. Each county is carved into a number of precincts. I think it's 62, 3 or 4 or 5, something like that. We can back up. We can find the actual number.
So the chair basically. Here, this is the ballot for who becomes the Democratic county chair.
Yes, exactly. And I think that Monica Morgan already holds that position. No one is running against her. And she would be running the Democratic Party's day-to-day affairs between now and the next election. Oh, and notice something real quick. You see initials?
Yeah.
JH, that's Joyce Huffman? I'm so sorry, I can't remember.
So who is that?
That is the district clerk.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the election judge also has to initial all of the ballots that are handed out to voters. So you'll see lots of initials.
Okay, so Democratic County Chair, this is the only spot where the position is going to be decided by this vote. And everything else is going forward to the general election.
Everything is a nominee for the position that will be determined in November.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I guess, in terms of precincts and Democratic or county chairs or whatnot, then this is the final election. All right, so if you want to, let's look at the Republican.
Okay.
And again, as I mentioned before, and just look at the first one, 01. Oh, and there's also all ballot. They keep changing this thing around. I just noticed something that says all ballot. For November 7th. Let's not worry about that. They tweak these things all the time, and they don't tell you ahead of time. So sometimes you're expecting something, and it's wait, this has changed.
All right.
Because we have more Republicans, you're going to see more names, more people running for different positions.
This is interesting. Okay, let me just compare, like, even just the. What is the difference here? I see railroad commissioner.
Yeah, 5 different people. The first name, Christy Craddock, is the incumbent, and you have 4 people running against Craddock. Now, by the way, on the left-hand side, if you want to look at that, you got the same statement. I am a Republican and understand that I am ineligible to vote or participate in another political party's primary election or convention during this voting year. So, again, you're committed here. And, again, like I said, let's say you're a Democrat and you're coming in and you want to, mess with Trump, by voting for Haley or somebody else. Mm-hmm. And you want to go back and vote for somebody in the runoff for the Democratic. You can't do it. You're aligned for this period of time with the Republican Party. And again, there's a record, right? The county records who, in fact, actually votes. Now, scrolling down, you might find something interesting when you look at president, right?
Yeah, the uncommitted.
Uncommitted.
That's
now,
what. Okay.
Yeah.
That's on the Republican. I went to look at the Democrat, and
it didn't have an uncommitted.
Yeah.
I can't explain exactly why not.
That's strange.
But what that means is a delegate who is uncommitted, you can change around. And there might be some of those. Of course, because of legal issues that
maybe Republicans are operating. Do they have a different set of rules than Democrats when it comes to this stuff?
Let's say different. There are some different rules. Let's say the overall rules are the same because they all go back to Texas election code. Mm-hmm. Maybe customs, habits, or whatnot, or tendencies. I'll give you. I'll tell you what. There are other things that we can remark on that Republicans are doing differently than others. In other words, there's basic rules associated with how this is run, but again, your strategy might vary. Now, let me point something else out. Now, the uncommitted means that it's like a free radical delegate. Now, if you look at the other names, Ryan Binkley, I don't know, David Stuckenberg, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Christie and Ron DeSantis. What about and Asa Hutchinson? Mm-hmm. What about those 4 names? They're not running anymore.
Yeah,
they pulled, but because just because you said you're not running anymore, if you're on the ballot, you're on the ballot.
Oh yeah, they're going to be some hardcore people who they'll throw in their sentimental.
They
vote.
might. We'll find out. I'm sure that they'll get something, but again, they're not running anymore. Now, what this means, though, if you vote for Chris Christie, let's say for whatever reason, there will be some delegates assigned to Chris Christie that then will decide, well, okay, do I want to now default to Trump or Nikki Haley or whatever?
So Texas is not, in terms of primaries, it is not a winner-take-all in terms of delegates for primary.
No. Now, there are, unless, now, again, I have to double-check the most recent rules because it used to be a little bit more open-ended. Mm-hmm. But there are certain rules in the past where if somebody gets a particular percentage, then you get to them all. Yeah. In other words, there's a threshold. The idea is you don't really want the person with 2% of the vote to
you don't want
delegates.
It spread out too much.
You have to have at least a particular percentage.
And then the top few get
exactly.
something.
To make it kind of ezy, at some point, you do have to you have to come up with a nominee, and then you have to rally support around the nominee. Because, again, as I mentioned, too, and actually we can think about this with Cruz. He doesn't have to worry about it. I'm not sure who Rufus Lopez is. Or I guess it's Redd, R-E-D-D, Gibson, Holland Redd Gibson. I'm not familiar with them. They could be perennial candidates for all I know. But let's say with Democrats, it's going to be very contentious. So that would be an issue there. So, all right. You have the top 2. They're probably going to be throwing things at each other and whatnot.
Are they going to be having debates or anything?
I don't know. I haven't really been following the individuals so much. I've been mostly following the overall process. But, after this, you kind of have to start to patch things up, get people together. Anyway, so there you got Cruz, Lopez, Gibson, right? Almost certainly it's going to be Cruz. Randy Weber, our boy, railroad commissioner. Again, you got 4 people challenging in the Republican primary the incumbent, who's also a Republican. Justice Texas, the 3 places in the Texas Supreme Court.
And I asked you something about earlier.
Why, yes, you may.
Railroad commissioner does more than just railroads. There's
they
something
don't
else?
do railroads anymore. I mean, this
Okay.
gets us into, you're an economics guy, into the nature of the Texas economy and how it's changed. We used to, when we were created, 1876, we were very much an agrarian state. Not necessarily small-scale farms, but not the huge business, agribusiness that we have right now. There was a feeling that a lot of businesses, a suspicion of business that we don't have so much anymore. So a lot of the restrictions on business activity, including regulations of railroads, were pretty comprehensive. There were a lot of limits placed on what businesses could do, But bit by bit over Texas history, those have been removed and also replaced with laws that are much more compliant to business. So we don't regulate railroads anymore. And of course, one of the reasons we don't really regulate railroads as much as we did was because we have alternative ways of transporting goods and goods, right, with highways and whatnot. But there was an increased awareness around 100, 110, 120. I can't remember the precise time this happened. That oil and gas, because that was becoming a bigger thing. We're talking 30-ish or so years after the Constitution, 40 years after the Texas Constitution was originally ratified. You begin to see more attention to oil and gas. And one of the things was, how do you regulate this thing? And the oil and gas industry itself, especially the larger ones, wanted to regulate some of this stuff because they didn't like the idea of too much competition. Because if you have too much supply, as we know, what happens to prices, right? So this was a way to try to regulate production of oil and gas in order to have a little bit more consistency in the price of a barrel of oil. And no surprise, too, if you look at the background of all these the people that are running and also the Railroad Commission itself, generally these are people that have a background in the oil and gas industry itself, So there's this concept of, agency capture that could be working here.
Okay, so Railroad Commissioner is really Oil Commissioner.
There was actually, yes, and there was actually a proposal that was defeated maybe about 3 or 4 legislatures ago to change it, to say, okay, we're not the Railroad Commission anymore, we're the Oil and Gas Commission. It was defeated. So maybe people don't really,
keep it a secret.
If not a secret, at least, facts hiding in plain sight.
Who knows? Maybe it'll expand to Energy Commissioner, or I don't know.
Well, by the way, speaking of that, if you want to talk about energy more broadly, what was it? I think it was last month. The number one producer of energy for the grid in the state of Texas was solar energy.
Wait. Say that again?
Solar energy was the number one producer of energy in the state. Remember, we get some from wind, we get some from generators, oil and gas.
When was this? Last year?
No, last month.
Last month, solar was the number. Now, when you say number one, what are we measuring?
The sources of electricity. You get generated all sorts of different ways. The wind turbines, solar energy, the panels or whatever.
So measured in like kilowatt hours.
I would imagine so. I don't know. We can look it up. That could be a good thing to talk about elsewhere.
I'm
simply mentioning that because, if we say oil and gas commission, maybe that could be part of it too. We don't want to say oil and gas because that focus is primarily there. If you say energy, that includes everything. Texas has a Texas Highway Fund that obviously deals with highways, but we also have a mobility fund that also deals with alternative ways to get from A to B.
Well, that's really fascinating. If in the middle of winter we're having solar playing a relatively larger role, and I could only think that that's because we're relying on heaters, which are maybe mostly going to be natural gas, and then maybe during the summer everyone cranks up their AC, and then now they have to create more electricity using natural gas or something.
I don't know if this is the type of thing that is even planned out ahead of time. I think it's just wherever it happens to be, where it's available and where it's drawn.
Okay.
You know, anyway, but that would be a good discussion elsewhere. All right, State Senate, Joan Huffman is running for re-election. State Representative, District 25, Cody Vasut. I cannot remember how you pronounce his name, and my apologies.
State Senate. Where are you getting State Senate? I got a bunch of justices.
The middle, first page, middle column at the bottom.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
District 17, District of the Texas Senate, District 25 of Texas House of Representatives. Yeah, and the right-hand column, you got all the Court of Appeals.
Interesting. So uncontested, and these are both incumbents right here. I mean, I'm just guessing.
I don't know. To be honest, are you talking about the justices and all that?
I'm talking about the state senator and state representative.
Oh, those are both incumbents. Okay. I mean, I just know that because I know that. You know?
Okay.
So's Weber, so's Cruz, obviously. Now the second page, again. On the left-hand side, you see a justice. You see a district judge, 461st Judicial District. All right, now that means that, again, Texas has 550-ish, a little bit less. I can't remember the precise number of district judges. And they're all elected countywide. Mm-hmm. Some with very few people, I mean, the district judge might be over multiple counties. There's 60 of them, I believe, in Harris County because it's got 5 million people. Wow. We have about 5 or 6, and there's just this one right here. Overlapping 4-year terms again. And let's say if you're elected to this, it's like you get a room with a bench and a jury box, and a court reporter and all the rest of that stuff, where the trial is going to take place. And you got offices in the back and clerks and all sorts of other people that are going to work with you. Sheriff. Now, again, here we got an idea of the other sorts of county positions that are up for grabs. Sheriff. There's no Democrat running. County tax assessor and collector. There's one person. She is the we were doing some other research in a different class, and so she's the person who is the incumbent right now. Making sure that you get the proper tax bill.
Okay.
County Commissioner Precinct 1, Justice of the Peace, County Constable, again, the security guard for Precinct 1. Again, my apologies if that's demeaning. It's just I just noticed that, whenever you needed, like I said, ballot boxes escorted someplace or the jury pool escorted from one place to another, it seems like you got the constable around. And so that's why I thought of them as being more like the security guards.
All right, so let's finish up with talking about these propositions.
Yeah. All right, so as we were talking about before, and several times, Democrats don't do this. Republicans are more likely to do this. Now, and this is more of a statewide thing. So it's not a Brazoria County Republican thing. It's a Texas Republican Party thing. Okay. Where they're throwing these propositions out where they're, effectively, you're asking your identifiers. And again, I mentioned that you might have 10, 15% turnout or whatever here. Now, those 10 or 15% would be the ones who are more attached to the party. And so I could see some value in getting their opinions about these sorts of things. So what's your Proposition 1? Texas should eliminate all property taxes without increasing Texans' overall tax burden. That's a pretty serious thing, but again, you get a general sense about what percentages. Again, if you're going to get rid of property, you got to get it someplace else if you don't want to shut down the schools and all the rest of this too. How are you going to fund streets and sewers and all the rest of that stuff too?
That's the question.
But it could be, let's say for the sake of argument, that's one where there's, let's say 55% say no. So this would be an indication to the leadership that, all right, let's drop this one. Okay, we don't need to focus on this. Proposition 2, Texas should create a border protection unit and deploy additional state law enforcement and military forces this year. I could see this one passing more.
Oh, yeah, this is a hot topic.
Yeah, and it could be that, all right, you want to... you only have limited resources and limited time to focus on things, and sometimes you have to pick and choose, and this could be some data that the state is getting, the state Republican Party is getting to figure out what to focus on.
Yeah.
Proposition 3, the Texas legislature should require the use of E-Verify by all employers in Texas to protect jobs for legal workers by preventing the hiring of illegal aliens. This has been very controversial over the time. Governor Perry was against this, saying that this is a way to ahead of time figure out who is here legally, who is not. Also meaning that if you're an employer you're kind of on the hook for hiring individuals, because that's an avenue a lot of people don't take. If you have people coming into the United States illegally and getting jobs, well, maybe that's not so much a worker thing. It could be a hirer thing, an employer thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could see this being shot down. Texas Legislature Proposition 4 should end all subsidies and public services, including in-state college tuition and enrollment in public schools for illegal aliens. So there's a lot of stuff having to do with illegal aliens. Yeah, again, what they choose, Democrats would probably say undocumented workers or something. So you see the language being used deliberately in different directions. Again, look, Proposition 5 is also illegal aliens. Texas National Guard.
Oh, wow.
Texas legislature should prohibit the deployment of the Texas National Guard to a foreign conflict unless Congress first formally declares war. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but based on what I teach, I don't think that is constitutional. But that doesn't matter. This is probably about getting a sense of the attitudes of the Republican identifiers.
Yeah.
You want to real quickly run through the rest of these things?
There are more proposals?
Yeah, there's a total of 13.
Oh, okay. Let's
Very
go.
quickly. Texas legislature should establish authority within the Texas Comptroller's Office. That's like the treasurer, tax collector, to administer access to gold and silver through the Texas Bullion Depository. Bullion it's like soup, isn't it?
Yeah, the little chunk that when I was a kid, I accidentally bit into some bouillon.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
the chocolate. Yeah, that's
yes, chocolate. That's the score. I'm like, what is this?
State of Texas should ensure that Texans are free to give or to withhold consent for any vaccine without coercion. Now, that could be pretty broad, too, because we've already got that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want your kid... meningitis? Some of the other vaccines that you have to have in order to go to public school.
Ooh, any vaccine.
But now keep in mind, too, that we're not talking about a law here. We're simply talking about, again, leadership in the Republican Party getting a sense of what the state thinks, the state Republican identifiers think.
Okay.
Republican Party of Texas should restrict voting in the Republican primary to only registered Republicans. That's an interesting one because there is this push to get rid within the Republican Party, get rid of the open primary and have a closed primary. So you have to register ahead of time. Now, that doesn't mean that a Democrat couldn't vote, but you would have to re-register as a Republican and then re-register back as a Democrat, which is a little bit of a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and they would have to create new procedures to.
They would. Now, I'm thinking though, if you did this, it would be on both sides. I'm thinking. You either register as a Republican or a Democrat. I don't think it's like you register as a Republican and nothing else. I don't think now. Again, we could look it up. Yeah, we're 20 seconds away from finding the information to answer this question.
Okay.
I don't think there are any states that have both. Right? One party has an open primary, the other party has a closed primary. There might, but.
Okay.
Texas, this is Proposition 10. The Texas Constitution should be amended to restore authority to the Texas Attorney General to prosecute election crimes. Now, here's controversy, too. We have an executive position in the state of Texas, elected position, Texas Attorney General. Ken Paxton holds that position. But the Texas Attorney General represents the state of Texas in court. Texas Attorney General is not a prosecutor. The prosecution of state crimes happens with the district attorney that's elected in each of the different counties, a position that's up for grabs, right? So that's how prosecution works. Some people would like, the Texas Attorney General, for example, Ken Paxton, would like to be able to prosecute election crimes. Now, here's what's interesting to me. It says to restore that authority. I really don't think the Attorney General ever had that authority, but I don't know enough about the history of the office to say that conclusively. But because I think for the Attorney General to do something, you have to say that you're allowed to do it in the Texas Constitution. And so I'm not aware of that allowance existing. But, again, give me 20 seconds and I can answer that question somewhat factually. Let's say the last three. Texas parents and guardians should have the right to select schools, whether public or private, for their children, and funding should follow the student. That's vouchers. That's the logic behind vouchers. Texas Constitution, Proposition 12, should be amended to require proof of citizenship before any individual can be registered to vote, meaning you have to actually show like a birth certificate or something like that, instead of just the the ID and everything. Make it a little make it a little bit more difficult to register to vote.
Yeah.
And again, a thing I like to bring up with students, it's like, how many votes does it take to win an election? One more than the other guy. And you don't have to have a landslide, and if you just deter or make it just a little bit more inconvenient for enough people to win,
Exactly.
well, there you go. All right, and the last one, Texas should ban the sale of Texas land to citizens, governments, and entities from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia.
It's very specific, but I also thought that was. Is there some type of executive? There's nothing like that. I thought that there was already some type of ban.
We have property rights. Very open property rights. In fact, when you're talking about this too, now especially China, because that's the outlier here, because China is very much an economic engine, not so much the other three. There was not too long ago when we were kind of like, come on, China, invest in Texas. Now that's kind of shifted. But how do we know whether or not this is a viable issue, at least electorally? Well, the Republican Party is trying to figure it out right now by giving it to people that are showing up in the Republican primary to make that decision, or to give them an indication about what they think. Now, this is the last one, I'm assuming, so it could very well that people are already kind of tired by the time they get here.
And this makes me realize that perhaps one of the most important reasons to vote in the primary is these propositions that don't immediately mean anything but may guide the future of the party.
Yeah, an interesting thing to do, as I mentioned, Republicans do this regularly. Go back to 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, see where those proposals back then were. And maybe some of those things are now law.
Oh, that would be a fascinating study.
Because it takes a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes politics is more of a marathon than a sprint.
Yeah.
You have to do it again and again and again until finally you get it passed.
Yeah.
And just be patient.
All right. All right. Interesting stuff here.
Thinking of patience. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. See you next time.